Well, good morning, everybody. It is Monday, September 19th, 2022. This is the Smart Networker. I'm Dave Rolfe, and welcome to our call. It's very interesting. The last couple of calls that were done on the Smart Networker were kind of off the cuff. There wasn't a planned agenda of any kind. And interestingly enough, the number of people watching those videos was the highest, versus the, pre-planned, pre-scripted presentations. So I said, well, that's interesting. So I guess I don't need to pre-plan anymore. We'll just go off the cuff and talk about whatever we want to talk about. And but I did do some planning. And what's really fascinating about the approach or the way that I'm trying to present information is to give you a knowledge base, kind of a library of sorts, of ways, responses, ideas, thoughts, information that you can then utilize building your business. Now, I'm reviewing, as you know, I'm redoing my books. The first off, Vested Interest, then became digital, then the digital version of Smart Networker, and that's what I'm redoing. But I'm including in the new book the sections on the take a look and the business success or building success and the frequently asked questions. And they're going to be in their own separate chapter, but it's the written version of those video presentations that were done on a Monday or in a Zoom content. And so as I translate from the PowerPoint back to a document that could be then read, I get to review all of the segments that were done at that time based on the information that was requested or what somebody wanted to hear, or I'd say, is there something you'd like me to talk about today, et cetera, et cetera. And last week we got into dealing with a couple of issues. One was, basically closing up the sale, or, how to get, the order. And it ended up getting into handling objections, really, or handling the situation in front of you. I really, in my experience, didn't run into too many objections to what we were talking about. What I ran into was not understanding. And of course, the whole purpose of that is to create an understanding, because when you create an understanding with somebody, then you can usually proceed with what you want to proceed with. If you can't create that understanding, then it's very difficult to move forward. Well, then I started to look at a couple of other things, and one was the first frequently asked question, which was, what do you say to get started? Now, this opened up a whole thought process of, starting conversations. And a lot of times people kind of get stuck sitting at home, trying to get their engines started, trying to get their business going, trying to think about, well, who do I talk to? Where do I go? How do I go about doing this? And interestingly enough, I'd been in that position many times myself. So I went back and reviewed what I had done and observed, and I thought, well, maybe that would be a good topic today, because I think it's the key to most people moving forward is having somebody to talk to. Now, I could ask this question, and that would be, well, if you had 20 people a day to talk to and present what you had to offer, would that be exciting? And I think the answer would be, yeah. Because isn't that what we like to do? We like to talk about what we do. And of course, this is a key ingredient to you and your posture is, you got to love what you're doing, and you got to be enthusiastic about it, and put in some insouciance into it, and really get behind the idea of what you represent, because that's what translates to other people. That's what they see. Again, it goes back to beauty's in the eye of the beholder. So whoever's looking at what you're talking about, they're looking at it from their perspective, what they perceive, what they understand, what they can associate it to with, other things that they know and are familiar with. Well, I did a call with somebody just a couple of, well, maybe a week ago, and they mentioned that they didn't know much about these refrigerator magnets, or no, it was somebody was telling me a story about using the magnets, and the person said, I understand you have these refrigerator magnets and they could do some help. I think it was Elaine that told me that story, and I thought, wow, isn't that amazing? Here's a guy that asked that question in 2022, 32 years after I had the same thought. When I was first approached about this, the gentleman said, hey, Dave, there's this new Japanese company in town. They're selling magnets, and I think you should get involved. Well, my first thought was refrigerator magnets, because there was no relationship to anything to represent magnets for health or magnets to make you feel, but nothing. I mean, we didn't have the internet at that time. I think I tried to look it up in Encyclopedia Britannica, and there was nothing there. I had a few friends on Wall Street that I asked, do you know any companies that deal in magnets? And they had no reference to that in the sense of a health issue or something along those benefits. So the association of the words being utilized and what I was perceiving was that thought. And now here was what was connected to that thought. The guy that did the pet rock. Now, the guy that did the pet rock made a fortune, and he took rocks and painted little faces on them and then glued things on them and put them in a store and called them the pet rock, and they sold like no tomorrow. Well, go figure. That you can make a fortune selling rocks. So then I figured, well, wow, if a guy can make a fortune selling rocks, maybe a guy can make a fortune selling refrigerator magnets. And that's what was going through my mind at that time, but it wasn't driving me cuckoo, gaga, saying I got to do this. It just didn't make sense. So in the sense of your approach, or you're talking to somebody, this is one of those key elements that you have to think about, in the sense of what do you say, or how do you open the door, or what do you talk about, what's important, those kind of issues. Because here was the bottom line to the approach and what you're ultimately trying to get to. You want to get into a conversation that allows you to discuss what you have intelligently, where it makes sense, where it fulfills a need, where it has a purpose. And when you do that, then the individual that's looking at it can then take the data that you're giving them and look at their circumstance or situation. Now, if I said to you this, I said, well, okay, how would you like an extra $5,000 per month? Now, I bet you dollars to donuts. I bet you just dollars to donuts that you could instantaneously figure out what you would do with an extra $5,000, because you know your life. You know what you do. You know what you spend money on. You know what things cost. You know what a trip costs. You know what a car costs. You know what insurance costs. You know what food costs. So, and you have a budget. And in that budget, you expend money, and then you have a job, and you work on an income, and you have most people have some kind of salary, or they're working on an hourly rate, so they know what they're making, and they know what they can spend, and they know what that buys. So from that perspective, if that kind of a question came out, then they would understand how to think about that. Well, that was part of the equation. That was part of what I started to think about, because in my circumstances, I left we had this business that went belly up because the manufacturer couldn't supply products. We had to close her down. All the money that I had went into that. The credit that I had went into that. So I was kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. Now, Lived in a great neighborhood. I drove a really nice car. Did we have two cars? Yeah, I think we had two cars at the time. And we had three kids and we had a couple of dogs. We had a swimming pool in the backyard. This was in Tarzana, California, and had a, a decent wardrobe of clothes, and life was up until that point in time pretty good. And then all of a sudden things changed. Now, the outside world did not know that I changed. The outside world didn't know what my circumstances were. The outside world didn't know that, heck, I'm in a pickle. I need to figure out a way to make $8,000 a month. And now this guy had been calling me and talking to me and talking about these magnets for health, and I had no interest in health, none. I was in good shape. There was nothing wrong. I didn't have any aches or pains. I slept really well no matter what. Nothing. So that did not resonate with my desire to move forward. Now, even though third party, tapes, this person got this person got this, because what had not been done is to relate that to my situation. That was the key. In other words, there was a marriage that needed to take place, and that was the marriage of the opportunity that was being presented to the problem that existed with me. Now, you probably heard from everybody that talks, that's what we deal, we solve problems. So that's really all there is. And we love to solve problems as individuals. That's what all we do. Something comes up, we handle it. Now, it's when we stop handling problems that then that's when life becomes a little bit of an issue. And we usually do that because we've run out of a solution, or we don't have one that's readily available, or the problem's just too big, or it's overwhelming, or a number. So let's not go there yet. We don't need to do that. We want to keep it simple and basic right now. So the association of what you talk about relevant to their circumstance becomes the issue. That's where there has to be a meeting. That's where there has to be what we talked about, agreement, because it's that agreement that's then going to eventually create some form of reality, because all realities come by agreement, whether it's something is there or something is not there. It's going to be there because of agreement. It's not going to be there because of another type of agreement. So it's all based on some kind of agreement. Leo had a big event last week with 60 people there, and so the reason 60 people were there was because there was an agreement with those 60 people to be there with Leo and Mike and whoever else was part of that presentation. Had there not been an agreement, those that didn't show up didn't make that agreement, so they didn't show up. So that's basically what I'm talking about. So in approaching people, again, what happens with a lot of circumstances is you approach people based on your circumstance. Now, this is very interesting because it is critical, and I'm just going to make this statement. Once you're in, it is no longer about you. Okay, once you're in, it's no longer about you. It's always about the other person, because they're the ones you need to come in. I mean, that's how it works, right? It works when people buy product. It works when people become a distributor and they consume product and they find other people and it grows and you create an organization. That's how it works. So, you getting what you want is important. Very, most definitely is important. But when you're involving somebody else, what's most important is, what do they want? And when I say that, it's like, what is it that needs to be created, produced, manufactured, that they're most interested in receiving, getting, having, experiencing? Now, in the sense of, and I beat this one up a gazillion times, the why and the want, it all boils down to a want. And a want can be anything. A want could be a sensation, could be a feeling, It could be, being appreciated. It could be being admired, being respected, being a part of the group. That could be something somebody wants. Or it could be physical. It could be an article, a thing, a car, money, you know. We just did, my wife went away on a business trip, and while she was gone, the plan was we were going to redo her office in the house, because the company that monitors the securities brokers in America, called FINRA, is allowing certain people to work from home based on what their business is, and of course it's a coordination between there and the company. So what we wanted to do was to, because the house had been remodeled, we did that last year. We didn't do that room, so we wanted to redo that room that she was gone. So we wanted to create a more aesthetically pleasing environment for her to work in versus a bedroom look. We wanted it to be an office look. So that was what was wanted. And then now, in order to get that, we had to go through some activities. Well, I had to call the contractor. We had to discuss the materials that were required. We had to understand the design that we wanted. We had to discover all of the, how it was going to look, the color of the paint, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. End result, they put it together. They did the work. The activities were done. We got the result. We have an office looking room. And so our business works the same way. I mean, if we look at it in the sense of, what is it you want? What makes that? In other words, I want a chocolate cake. So what makes a chocolate cake? You need eggs and flour and flavoring and all of the, I'm not a baker, so I don't know all the ingredients, but a baker would know all the ingredients. So they'd mix it in a bowl, put it in the oven, and then poof, chocolate cake, right? So you want to build a business. And again, you're the baker, you're the manufacturer, you're the architect, you're the boss. Now, here's another interesting piece of information. Your business is not you. Your business is a thing. T-H-I-N-G, it's a thing that you create, that you make. And here's the other interesting thing. The business doesn't do anything on its own unless you program it to do something. So in other words, at the end of the month, if there's no money in the checking account and there's a bunch of bills sitting on the desk, the checking account's not going to change, or the bills aren't going to get paid unless you, the human, does so and goes through the activities that make it work. So what's really fascinating about this whole idea is you can create a plan and you can direct the business to do certain things. Now, for the most part, you're the one doing the activities to begin with, but there are many ways to look at how this gets done that will come in future lessons or future Dave Talks, if we want to call that, about this. Right now, we're talking about the beginning. So the approach then needs to be something that is going to attract what you want. This is really important. So in the beginning, I started off with the product as the first approach. And hey, here's this unique company in town. They got this very interesting product. And our main product at that time was the sleep system. And it was big, it was thick, it was hard, and again, it took a while to get used to. And of course, if you got used to it, one of the benefits of it was really good sleep. But you had to get used to it first. You had to experience it first. So as a result of that, okay, if you didn't do this right, then the person could get the wrong perception. So if you put them on the bed one night and then said, hey, how do you like it? They said, I hate it, because it was a brick, and then you might be in a little bit of trouble. So in looking at that, I said, okay, something's got to happen between my ability to open the door and my ability to close the door and get the job done. And I got to talk about a subject that seems to be important, and important enough to get people to look, because that was the engagement I needed. That was the perception I needed. So let's look at this. I asked you at the very beginning, if you had 50 people a day to talk to about your product that wanted to talk to you, would you like that? And of course, you all raised your hand. And bingo, of course. We hear all the time, yeah, I got a call from somebody and they were a reference and they heard about this and I talked about it and they bought the product. Bang, that's easy. We had that in all industries, have that kind of a circumstance. I had a friend who was selling a house. I turned him on to the realtor took it over and sold the house. So again, those kind of situations happen all day long. What we're talking about is, how do we get into that to begin with, to get that started, to get people to look at what you have so that you can create this and get what it is that you want. So the first thing I looked at on this was that I needed somebody that was on the same page as me. Now, what does that mean? Well, I was serious. I needed to make $8,000 a month. That was my budget. I wanted to make more, but I didn't know anything about that at that time. But I realized after talking to my support group and understanding how this business works, that in order for me to get that, I needed like-minded people. So I call that the mutual want. The mutual want. We had to want the same kind of stuff. Now, when that occurred, I realized, and this was very important, it was like people who loved to golf, people who loved hockey, people who love football, people who love knitting, people who love walking, people who love rock climbing. There was a common love for the same thing. And as a result of that, the communication went through the roof. Now, why is that important? Because this is a business that's all you do is communicate. You talk to people, you present, you talk, you provide, you demonstrate, you answer questions, you show, you tell, you talk, you solve problems, situations, you talk your brains out. That's what we do. So if you had somebody to talk to that liked what you had, then it was much easier to talk to them, and they were much easier to communicate back. Now, of all the experience, now I've had lots of experience in this. I've sold many other products where I had to talk to other people and create the interest. In other words, cold call, talk to them, get them interested, get them involved. A lot of work there. I mean, it's just a lot of work because you have extra steps in the process. You have to, contact them. You have to find out what's needed and wanted. You have to, go through presentations and then deal with considerations of whether they like it or not, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that was a very valuable learning experience because it gave me some ideas of how to approach this. So I'm going to cut to the chase because I don't want this to last all day. It could last all day. It's one of those topics. So when I was going out there to find somebody to talk to, my first approach was always social. How are you? Why are you here? What are you doing? Where are you going? What are you all about? Et cetera, et cetera. Just, like you go to a party and you run into somebody, hey, how are you? What brought you here? How do you know these guys, et cetera, et cetera. And it's social chit chat. Now, because was a business guy, because I needed to make money, my objective always was, is there a way that I can get this person to engage in a conversation about my business for their benefit? So I'd wake up in the morning, I'd have my battle plan, I'd have my game board up there. I needed this guy, I wanted to fill that position. I'd walk out the house. Anybody I could talk to, I would talk to with that in mind. With that in mind. Ralph and Jerry happened that way. I mean, they were a complete surprise. My neighbor was a complete surprise in that way. But again, the thought process was there. I ahead of time knew I needed to go out and do something. Then I went out on my daily activities and did that. And so my objective was to get into a conversation where they might ask me what I did. Now, I heard Leo has a really famous line that he uses with people when he meets them. And he said, you know, it's something on the neighbor. It's very close to what I would say, but do you know anybody that might be interested in making a ton of money so they can retire in 3 years? Something like that. Is that right, Leo? Is that something close to that? Yeah. There you go. And again, what a hook. Now, what I knew, and this was really important information, it's in chapter 4 of the Smart Networker, which will be coming out again, was when a person has a problem that they can't solve, it doesn't go away. It sits there. It's like Murphy sitting on your shoulder. Well, the problem sits there somewhere in your mental capacity. And here's the interesting thing. If a solution comes along that could potentially solve that problem, it raises its hands and said, yes, I'm interested. That's how it works. I mean, it's phenomenal. So I knew that. So I knew that my job was to just get out there, ask questions, and do social chit chat, ask questions, and then find out one of two very important things. One was, are you satisfied with what you're doing? And or can you see yourself doing this for the rest of your life? And because what I wanted to find out was somebody that needed a change in their life or was dissatisfied with what they were doing. Now, those are two very, very, very key aspects of what you were looking for. So how would that come across? Well, you'd ask the person, well, do you like doing what you're doing? Well, you know, it gets me by, but it's not what I want to do for the rest of my life. Bang. You know, there's a need of change coming. You need that. And it's in that frame of mind that when people are there is when what you say then becomes relevant and something that they could agree to. So person's making $50,000 a month currently with a job. They hate the job. They don't like to do it. They're in that need of change. And you say, well, what's $50,000 a year? Well, 50,000 likes 4,000 a month, right? Approximately. And you come along and you say, well, you know, if I could show you how to make $5,000 to $6,000 a month on a residual long-term basis, could we sit down and talk? What do you think is going to happen? They're going to sit down and talk because they need a change. It's more like just a little bit more than what they're making. They already know their budget. They know what they spend and how they live their life. So they've already calculated what that extra money would do and where they would go and what they would want. And they become curious. They want to know, because that's who we are. We're curious creatures. You know, we like to know things. We want to know things. We want to know more, but we want to know it intelligently. We don't want to be, you know, it's not like we want to, you know, those guys that come along and get you to buy whatever and they're full of hot air and it's a scam. And no, we want to have integrity, make it real, and make sure that they understand this isn't just like a gift horse in the mouth. This is an opportunity. You go to work like anything else and you could build it properly. You know what to do, the skills, et cetera, et cetera. So that became an important message that I started to work on and develop for myself. And again, we're talking about you as an individual, and you know, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. You can utilize this information or not. That's up to you. That's your choice. But what I was interested in doing is, how do I open the door on a continual basis and have plenty of people to talk to without thinking that I am, you know, trying to slam them with my product or slam them with my opportunity, and make them feel comfortable and willing to communicate with me. So the key is, and here, this is what we'll end on. The key is to find out what's important to them, because they'll talk about them all day long. They'll talk about their situation all day long. So that became the approach: social chit chat, how is life, what's going on, and then get into a situation of asking those questions. Well, do you like doing what you're doing for the rest of life? Now, if the person told me, yeah, love what I do, I want to stay here, this is great, it's got a great pension, I can't see doing anything else, as a matter of fact, I should be able to retire on time, I'm going to have a hard time fighting that. If that's legitimate, then that's real. Now, here was the other thing to add into that. I quickly realized that this isn't for everybody. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, we need people to drive buses. We need people to drive trucks. We need people to be school teachers. We need people to be government people. We need accountants. We need all those other things. So this is a specialized field. And so therefore, we can utilize this to our best interest. Because if it was ever for everybody, we'd be done a long time ago. There wouldn't be any opportunity. And this is an opportunity. Like there's a finite number of security people in this country. There's a finite number of insurance people. There's a finite number of accountants and so on and so forth. And that's how we have to look at that. So what I started to understand, and it was very important to building the business, was my job was to find those that were interested in this operation. And the key to this operation, this style of business, was the freedom seekers, the people that had not really made it successfully yet, were looking for an opportunity, were willing to go to work, were willing to do what was necessary, were willing to learn what to do, and didn't like what they were doing and wanted something that was much bigger. So I could paint a much bigger picture. I could paint all of those things based on understanding what we had and learning what you need to learn to become a successful network marketer. But the key to getting the conversation going was to find out what other people were interested in and cater to that need, and then take that information and marry it with your information and then create that agreement. So hopefully this helps add to your repertoire of information about getting the ball started. There was on daverolf.com in the business success and frequently asked questions, it's in the frequently asked questions section #1, and it's what to do, what to say to get started. So you might want to review that lesson. Okay, right now we'll end the call and go into our Q&A. So thanks for being on the call, and we'll see you next time on the Smart Networker. Bye for now, and we'll see you next time.